1000 मील सफलता की यात्रा की शुरुआत भी एक कदम से ही होती है। वो एक कदम जो कि 1954 में लिया गया था। And today, in 2023, with all our pride and accomplishments, we are celebrating FMS Founders Day celebration in the presence of pillars of this great institute, distinguished guests and leaders of tomorrow, and that's our students. So can we hear it for FMS? Woo! Once again, a very good evening. I would like to extend a special thanks to our alumni and students of FMS and a heartfelt welcome to our chief guest, Mrs. Nirupama. Ma'am, आपका बहुत-बहुत स्वागत है। Dean Dr. Vivek Suneja, Professor MP Gupta and his family, all research scholars and faculty of FMS. And yes, a special thanks to our title sponsor, STL, Sterlite Technologies. Our title sponsor, STL, is a leading global optical and digital solutions company providing advanced offerings to build 5G, rural, FTTX, enterprise and data center networks. The company, driven by its purpose of transforming billions of lives by connecting the world, designs and manufactures in 4 continents with customers in more than 100 countries. STL has earned numerous Great Place of Work awards and been voted as Best Organization for Women. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our title sponsor. And of course, speaking about our main sponsor HUL, who are present in our midst today with the brand Horlicks Women Plus. Horlicks Women's Plus is a bone nutrient specialist that is clinically proven to help strengthen your bones in just 6 months. Horlicks Women's Plus provides 100% RDA of calcium, vitamin D, vitamin K2, which are proven nutrients to help improve bone health. I once again wish to thank our co-sponsors, Star Health, Mirchi, HDFC Ergo, our associate sponsors, Nestle and India Infra, our other sponsors, Artemis, Times Out of Home, the Media Supplement, Ad Growth Media, India Outdoor Advertising, and Global Advertisers. Can we hear it for all our sponsors? Please, huge round of applause. Thank you so much. It is indeed a delight to be back to the splendid Vigyan Bhavan as a venue after 2 years of online event owing to COVID. I now seek your indulgence. I wish to formally but briefly introduce the FMS Forum and late Professor Das Gupta, founder of the Faculty of Management Studies. The FMS Forum, as you are aware, is a not-for-profit society which was established in March 2014. This was by a group of distinguished alumni of the Faculty of Management Studies. The FMS Forum is a registered society managed by an elected body. The Dean of FMS is the patron of the FMS Forum. This forum marquee event, Founders Day, stands out as a collaborative endeavor across all stakeholders who take pride in associating with the institution's salience to the business world. The FMS Forum, through its alumni members, aims to capture and spread the spirit of Guru Dakshina. The FMS Forum members strive to design and build intellectual capital for brand FMS. Let's put our hands together for this forum. Please, huge round of applause. And now, dear ladies and gentlemen, late Professor Das Gupta, जिनके कारण आज हम यहाँ सब उपस्थित हैं. I wish to share some of the highlights of his work life and his commitment to management education. Shortly after independence, a band of visionaries led by Professor V.K.R.V. Rao and supported by then Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru were fired up by the ambition to create a center for advanced learning and research in the social sciences comparable to the best in the world and worthy of an independent subcontinent. Thus, in 1948, the Delhi School of Economics was conceived on the lines of the London School of Economics. Subsequently, when Professor Rao became the Vice Chancellor of the university, the professor The process of setting up 4 new departments, namely sociology, geography, business management, and commerce, this was initiated at that point of time. Professor Das Gupta too was an institution builder par excellence. His dream and vision was to transform the Department of Management Education into a full-fledged business school. A business school that would over time attain international stature. And undoubtedly, FMS has attained this stature, isn't it? Can we hear it loud? Woo! Thank you. Moving ahead with our celebration, I would like to humbly invite the President of the FMS Forum, Mr. Rajkamal Sharma, to deliver the welcome address. Mr. Rajkamal Sharma, batch of 79, President, the FMS Forum, is an international business consultant. He has had distinguished career in the FMCG industry with stints in Unilever and Nestle. Presently, as country manager of Global Appetite Inc., a Canadian company, he is assisting them develop their international business. So now, can we just put our hands together and, of course, welcome Mr. Sharma. Over to you, sir, please.
Thank you so much, Paragi. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the Founders' Day of the Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi. The FMS Forum is delighted to collaborate with FMS to organize this marquee event every year. A special thanks to the Dean, Professor Vivek Suneja, who is the patron of the forum and who has always been highly supportive of all the activities and all the events that we have hosted over the last few years. Every year, the forum has been picking up a theme which is most relevant to various people connected with business. We met at the Vigyan Bhavan a little over 3 years ago to discuss whether the India story was one of glitter or gloom. And then came turbulent times because of the global pandemic. India demonstrated a resilient leadership, withstood the supply chain disruption, and then last year we took up the vexing issue of climate change. This year too, in the run-up to the event, the Executive Council of the FMS Forum debated on the theme and also discussed with the Dean. We believe that India's rise in the global economy has been a much talked about topic in recent months. While India overtook UK in 2022 as the 5th largest economy, there are analysts and economists who are seeing the opportunity for India to grow further and faster than a number of other world economies, and perhaps overtake Japan and Germany to become the 3rd largest economy in the world by 2030. During these last 3 years of turmoil and turbulence in the world, India has strengthened its position, whether it becomes the 3rd largest economy or not. Whether it happens sooner rather than later may be a debatable issue. But it seems clear, as the CEO of Morgan Stanley dared to say, that this is India's decade. And McKinsey goes further and says that it is not just the decade, but perhaps the century that belongs to India. And that was our trigger to decide on the theme. One thing is certain, the social scenario in India has changed over the years. The educational system in India has prepared some great business leaders and has been inspiring others to do well both locally and globally. The confidence that the average Indian has gained is palpable. India has been a hub of several startups, and over 100 of them have become unicorns. We also know that the nature of India's economy and its political structure causes several impediments. Therefore, it remains to be seen when the world's most populated country would reach that position. We are delighted that we have a number of very distinguished and extremely knowledgeable speakers from varying backgrounds to share their views with us this evening, and I'm sure you're all looking forward to listening to them. Thank you once again for joining this evening, and here's wishing you all a pleasant and informative evening.
Thank you so much, sir, for your inspiring words. Moving ahead, let's now hear from our sponsors. So all your eyes and ears over to the screen, please.
is a blockchain of dots, and data connectivity is the most fundamental. In no time, everything from enterprises to cities, to economies, to cultures will be connected, networked. This is tomorrow, and it can only be created if we think beyond tomorrow. We build end-to-end technology solutions that make the digital networks ready for tomorrow. With unique capabilities in optical networking, global services, digital and technology solutions. The world of digital is our oyster. We co-imagine, co-own, and co-create the future with our customers for a value proposition of the whole, which is greater than the sum of its part. For telcos, it is creating hyperspeed connections by the millions. For what we call the cloud era, it is all about the intelligent edge and massive connectivity. We enable virtualized gigabyte broadband and offer integrated 5G solution. Large enterprises need to win at everything. Performance, digitization, and security. And what about people and nation? They are all our customers. We light up millions of nodes that democratize data for all. All of this is not simple, but then who wants simple? We love problems. That is why our customers love our end-to-end solutions. With STL's 25 years of experience in optical fiber innovations and India-made solution ready for the world, we enable full value of connectivity by creating networks that offer the digital-first experience to your customer. Our mission is to transform billions of lives by connecting the world. We believe in giving back to the society and communities. We do all of this the stellar way, by creating happy teams full of innovators and hustlers with over 30 plus nationalities. We delight inside out, and that is what makes STL a great place to work. Here we are with over 750 plus patents, 4 innovation centers, global production facilities producing more than 50 million fiber kilometers, 3,000 plus happy employees, having academy trained more than 100,000 plus tech professionals. Now, in the Guinness Book of World Record. Changing the status quo, taking the world beyond tomorrow. STL, beyond tomorrow.
हमारी संस्कृति में किसी भी चीज की शुभ शुरुआत दिया प्रज्वलित करके की जाती है और इसी परंपरा को निभाते हुए for lighting a lamp, I would like to humbly invite our Honorable Chief Guest, Ms. Nirupama Rao, Dean Dr. Vivek Suneja, Mr. Parigi sir, Mr. Rajkumar Sharma, Mr. Ashwin Malik, onto the dais to light the lamp. Please, can we have you all out here onto the dais to light the lamp? और आप लोगों की तालियां भी उसके साथ में रहें तो बहुत खूब होगा. Thank you. वक्रतुंड महाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभा निर्विघ्नं कुरुमदेव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा. श्री गणेश के नाम के साथ and with lighting of this lamp, let's create the vibe of positivity which is definitely there in our FMS, but let's take an oath to keep up this positivity, this dedication towards our college, towards our teachers, and of course, जैसे FMS forum की हम बात कर रहे थे, गुरु दक्षिणा के रूप में अपने इस डेडिकेशन को बनाए रखना है. And with this lighting of lamp, we are formally starting this great celebration, and that is FMS Founders Day Celebration 2023. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Ma'am, for a photo op, if you can please just. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. And now moving ahead, let's now hear from one of our sponsors. Please, all your eyes and ears on the screen once again.
India, one country, many dreams, a past to cherish, a future to redeem. So as we complete 20 years, let's take you on a tour of the India we serve and the Indians we secure. We are Indian, serving India for 20 years. Over the last 14 years, HDFC Urban has grown at twice the industry growth rate at a 34% compounded annual growth rate to become the 5th largest general insurer in the industry and 3rd largest in the private sector. Today, we have a well-balanced portfolio across lines of business, across distribution channels, and an extensive reach across the length and breadth of the country. We have been profitable since FY13 and have a dividend track record every year since FY14. Since inception, we earned the trust of over 7.5 crore fellow citizens and counting.
We have won the highest award from ICAI for the quality of financial reporting in the 7 of the last 11 years.
As we complete 20 years, we take inspiration from our past to create our future. We take on this ambitious target of shifting our approach to acquire mind share of our citizens and create an ecosystem to touch their lives on a daily basis. We continue to evolve as a digital organization with a human heart. We are HDFC Urban, your insurance partners today and always.
Now moving ahead with our celebration, it's time to invite head of FMS family. As a Felix Scholar, he studied for his doctoral degree at the University of Reading in United Kingdom. For over a decade, he taught at various premier universities in Britain, including at the University of Salford, Manchester, and at the Open University Business School. Upon his return to India, he joined FMS as professor. He has served as Dean Planning of the University of Delhi and as Pro Vice Chancellor of the University of Delhi. Yes, I am talking about our Dean, Dr. Vivek Suneja. Can we have a huge round of applause for him? Professor Suneja has published several books and papers in the areas of strategy, marketing, economics, ethics, culture, and public policy. Recently, he chaired the new Education Policy Implementation Committee of the university, which formulated the structure of the new 4-year undergraduate program of Delhi University, which has been adopted this year itself. Over the years, Professor Suneja has done consulting and training work for several prominent international and national firms and organizations. He is deeply committed to furthering societal well-being. With huge round of applause, let's welcome the backbone of FMS, and yes, he is Head and Dean, Dr. Vivek Suneja. Please, let's hear it for him. And I would request Mr. Rajkumar Sharma to please join him on the dais. I would request Mr. Sharma to kindly felicitate our Dean, Dr. Vivek Suneja. Thank you so much, Sharma sir. And now FMS के Head and Dean, Dr. Vivek Suneja. Over to you, sir, please.
Thank you. Dear Miss Nirupama Menon Rao, our chief guest, Professor M.P. Gupta, who has given a lifetime of service to FMS, the distinguished panelists, Mr. Navtej Sarna, Mr. S.C. Garg, Mr. Rakesh Mohan, Mr. Harshvardhan Singh, Mr. Jayant Patil, our eminent moderator, Mr. Parikshit Luthra, and our eminent Master of Ceremonies, Ms. Paragi Dubey, the executive members of the FMS Forum, including the President, Mr. Rajkumar Sharma, Vice President Mr. Ashwin Malik, Secretary Mr. Puneet Wadhwa, the former FMS Forum President Mr. Parigi, all our sponsors, fellow FMS faculty, former FMS faculty, students, alumni, and participants. It's a privilege and an honor to be addressing you all on the doubly auspicious occasion of FMS Founders Day and Mahashivratri. FMS was founded in 1954 with Professor Das Gupta as the founder dean, and from then on has gone from strength to strength. It has consistently maintained its ranking amongst the top 5 business schools in India, reputed for excellence in teaching, research, consultancy, policy making, societal outreach, and collaboration with industry and government. Before I say a few words about the theme of today's deliberations, let me briefly acquaint the audience with some of the recent developments in FMS over the course of the last 1 year. We had absolutely brilliant student placements with respect to both summer internships and final placements. In order to augment our academic infrastructure, a number of knowledge resources such as Harvard University case study materials, various economic and financial databases, and the latest software have been purchased for our students and academic staff. In terms of physical infrastructure, both the North and South campuses are being completely renovated and refurbished. New physical infrastructure is also being created on a major scale. The first floor of the Agricultural Economics building, which is adjacent to the FMS North campus, has been allocated to FMS by the university. 6 additional floors are being constructed over the first floor of the Agricultural Economics building for FMS. These 2 buildings are being connected through a link bridge. In the South campus, 2 additional floors are being added to the FMS building for providing training and guest house facilities for participants in executive development programs. Last month, FMS recruited 23 new faculty, many of whom are with us this evening. We welcome them all to the FMS family. Finally, we have taken steps to improve the rigor of our programs by adopting stricter attendance and assessment norms. Can we have applause for that as well? The theme of today's deliberations is this India's century. Is India poised to become the world's 3rd largest economy? We have a stellar cast of speakers and panelists to discuss this exciting prospect. I would like to touch upon a complementary aspect of economic development, the social, cultural, and spiritual. India has always stressed the 4 Purusharthas: Arth, Kam, Dharma, and Moksha. While the pursuit of Arth and Kam, material and sensual well-being is important, it is not sufficient. For man to feel a sense of fulfillment, Dharma, righteousness, and Moksha, liberation, are indispensable. It is instructive to remember that the Buddha, who taught the truth of suffering and the path to its cessation, discovered these insights not because he was trying to escape or remedy material poverty. Siddhartha Gautam was born an affluent and powerful prince, but realized that material wealth and comfort are not sufficient to confer lasting joy. The word he used for suffering was dukkha. When his sermon on the 4 Noble Truths was recorded in Sanskrit, it was said that he had diagnosed the cause of dukkha to be trishna. The English word thirst is etymologically derived from the Sanskrit trishna. It is hence often said that the Buddha taught that the cause of suffering is trishna, thirst, craving, desire. But the Buddha did not teach in Sanskrit. He taught in Pali. And the word he used in Pali was not Trishna, but Tanha. Tanha means loneliness, a sense of alienation or isolation, a sense of being incomplete, unfulfilled. The Buddha pointed out that this sense of Tanha arises because we are not in touch with our real natures, our deep, still inner consciousness, which is the source of all perception, intelligence, affection, and compassion. Most of us live identified with the superficial aspects of our minds at the level of ego-centered thoughts and ego-induced emotions. Most of our thoughts and emotions are conditioned by our personal, social, and cultural experiences and by our genetic animal heritage and impulses. Consequently, our minds do not breathe and live in freedom, but are in bondage to a multitude of conditionings. And when we are not in touch with our true authentic nature, our true authentic self, how can we ever make contact with somebody else's true authentic self? What we call heart-to-heart conversations is often merely mind-to-mind chattering. No wonder we are disconnected from both ourselves and from others. Hence the loneliness, tanha. Tanha creates psychological suffering, dukkha. We then try to escape from dukkha by taking recourse to 1,000 distractions and transient pleasures. But since the root problem has not been properly diagnosed and treated, the thirst, the trishna, is ever with us. We never feel holy. The insight of the Buddha is as true today as it was in 600 BC. Owing to technological and economic progress, there are now far more avenues to try and slake our thirst than before. However, unless we reclaim our cultural heritage and timeless wisdom, material growth shall not suffice. We must create an enlightened, harmonious, affectionate, and compassionate society. We should live our lives with notions of reasonable sufficiency, predicated on need, not greed. We may then be able to tackle the problems of global warming, sustainability, and equity. The very survival of our species and our planet is under threat today. I'm sure we shall have outstanding deliberations on all aspects relating to our nation's future, given the brilliant people who are assembled here this evening. May FMS continue to flourish and contribute to our country's well-being. Long live FMS, long live India, long live the community of nations. After all, as the genius of India discovered and has kept alive throughout the ages, the spirit that animates the entire cosmos is eternally one, indivisible, non-dual, Advait. Mahashivratri symbolizes the marriage, the union of Shiv, consciousness, with Shakti, energy, thereby suffusing all matter with spirit. As Kabir put it, जब मैं था तब हरि नहीं, अब हरि है मैं नाही, प्रेम गली अति सांकरी, जामे दो ना समाही. Thank you.
Long live FMS. Thank you so much for your enlightening words, Dr. Vivek, Suneja, Dean of FMS. Moving ahead, let's now hear from our sponsors, please.
ये कहानी ऐसी ही है, इसे सुनाने मुझे आना पड़ा। इस कहानी में एक वाइफ है, लेकिन उस वाइफ के हस्बैंड है 1000 करोड़ लाश। सुनिए सिर्फ मिर्ची प्लस ऐप पर।
डाउनलोड मिर्ची प्लस, कहानियों का असली अड्डा।
मिर्ची प्लस, कहानियों का असली अड्डा। अब प्यार सुनाई देगा। मिर्ची प्लस, कहानियों का असली अड्डा।
इस कहानी में एक वाइफ है, लेकिन उस वाइफ के हस्बैंड है। इस कहानी में जिससे मर्डर हुई। ये कहानी ऐसी ही है, इसे सुनाने मुझे आना पड़ा।
डाउनलोड मिर्ची प्लस, कहानियों का असली अड्डा।
हर रहस्य से पर्दा उठेगा। मिर्ची प्लस, कहानियों का असली अड्डा।
ज्ञान ही शक्ति है, जानकारी स्वतंत्रता है। प्रत्येक परिवार और समाज में शिक्षा प्रगति का आधार है। इस वाक्य को चरितार्थ करते FMS के faculty members and our brilliant students. Moving ahead with this grand celebration of FMS Founders Day celebration, now it's the time that we all have been really waiting for, indeed, for a very long time, and that is the memorial lecture. This year's lecture is being delivered by our respected chief guest, Miss Nirupama Rao. You must have been, seeing her on national or global TV. Many of you must have read about her in media. Some of you possibly are following her on Twitter, but most of us have never met her in person. Friends, it's indeed an honor and privilege to meet and greet her in person. Ms. Rao, retired as Foreign Secretary to the Government of India, the senior most position in the Foreign Service, being the second woman to occupy this post. She was the first woman spokesperson of the Indian Foreign Office. Ms. Rao served as India's first woman ambassador to Sri Lanka and to the People's Republic of China. She was ambassador of India to the United States. As a serving diplomat for 38 years, Ms. Rao was a member of the delegation led by the late Prime Minister, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, during the historic visit to Beijing in December 1988. On her retirement from active diplomatic service, she entered the world of academics with an appointment as Meera and Vikram Gandhi Fellow at the India Initiative at Brown University, USA. Ms. Rao has continued to pursue her academic interests and taught an undergraduate seminar at Brown University, USA titled India in the World. In retirement, Ambassador Rao has also pursued her passion for music with her album Peace is My Dream across all leading music platforms. Of course, you can go and hear it. She recently authored a book, The Fractured Himalaya, India, China, Tibet, 1949-62. Unknotting this intensely complex saga of the early years of India-China relationship. As a diplomat practitioner, Ms. Rao's telling is based not only on archival material from India, China, Britain, or US, but also on a deep personal knowledge of China. She is a staunch believer in the power of social media as an advocacy platform for policies and etc. And also she has over 1 million followers on Twitter. Please put your hands together to welcome our chief guest, Ms. Nirupama Rao, onto the dais, ma'am, please. अतिथि स्वागत का सत्कार निभाने के लिए मैं साथ में इनवाइट करना चाहूंगी एक बार फिर President of the FMS Forum, Mr. Rajkamal Sharma. So if you can please join us. Mr. Sharma, I would request to felicitate our honorable chief guest. Huge round of applause, please. And now to deliver the Professor Das Gupta Memorial Lecture. Over to you.
Good evening, and let me wish each and every one of you a very happy Mahashivaratri. Professor Vivek Suneja, President Rajkamal Sharma, the faculty of the FMS and students, members of the executive program, dear friends and former colleagues. It's an honor to be present here today and to deliver the Professor Das Gupta Memorial Lecture. In doing so, I honor the memory of a great institution builder. Persons like him, individuals like him, have been true builders of the nation, and we remember him particularly for the founding of the Faculty of Management Studies. I noticed that it's referred to as the Red Building of Dreams. And since the theme of my talk today is this India's century, I always perhaps like to think, tread softly because you tread on our dreams when it comes to talking about India. The question before us is this India's century? We all know that India is unique, it is distinctive. In many ways, it is the classic Madhya Desha in Sanskrit. In English, it kind of translates rather, I would say not adequately, to Madhya Desha, but you must remember that this definition of India existed before China's definition of itself as the middle country. Essentially, India is a country on the crossroads. It is as much a Eurasian country as it is an Indo-Pacific country. It is the place of every arrival. It's not just a big country, of course it is, but more than that, I would use the adjective vast. It is a vast country. Vast in terms of democracy, in terms of demography, in terms of diversity. It is a civilizational state, enduring, resilient, and value-based. It is magnetic, drawing to its shores the curious, the exploring, the questioning. Above all, the potential, the promise, and the inherent and perhaps not fully tapped or harnessed power are the qualities that come to mind when describing India. What is clear today is that India, to use a phrase that Mao Zedong used for post-revolutionary China, has stood up. It is being counted. Its voice is being heard, and that voice is the voice of a multipolar world, a voice in the defense of multilateralism. It embraces multitudes, to use the words of Walt Whitman. It has the drive and the determination to give voice to the voiceless. Today, as India is the host country for the G20, its advocacy of one world, one earth, one family expresses the deployment of that voice, that civilizational conviction, and its relevance for a divided, vociferous world across geographies. The challenge, therefore, is how to generate more power from this inherent ability that we possess, particularly to inspire an aspirational global South. India is uniquely poised to be that voice of the aspirational global South, seeking its legitimate place on the global high table. And this is exactly what we did when we hosted the recent virtual summit of the Global South. Now, the challenges to us lie across various dimensions. The first is, of course, always the first, the economic dimension. Nobody doubts our potential in this field, and that new India, as our Prime Minister terms it, is dreaming big and has the capacity to realize those dreams. The key word is the enormous positivity in the country. The PM speaks of making the country future ready. There is determination to move forward to meet our goals to be a developed country by 2047, the centenary of our independence, to reach a $20,000 per capita GDP, to be a front-ranking global economy. We are getting there, of course. None of our people should be left behind. For Gandhiji's vision of wiping the tear from every eye should guide us. We have to take all with us, for this is a country that draws its USP from its management of diversity, of the ability to embrace within its democracy different strokes, different voices. There is food and water security to be augmented. There is energy security to be assured. The deployment of more resources for health and education, gender equity, and of course, the major I word, which is infrastructure, digital and physical infrastructure, on which we are seeing more major changes. No country on earth is engaged in the major exercise of transformation for development in a futuristic manner that we wish to achieve today. To this, we should add more and more good governance across our federated state structure so that state capacity to deliver on targets and goals is radically refreshed, reimagined, and overall improved so that there is no scope for deviant trends that result in dilution and damage of the capacity to deliver to the people what is their fundamental and inalienable right to development. Reform, as Deng Xiaoping once said about China, is the second revolution. All across India, I see a revolution taking place of one vast country, aspirational and ambitious, confident and assertive, reforming itself for the future, guided by the goal of gaining for India her rightful place as a beacon for the world, not because she has hegemonistic intentions, but because she has so much to give to the world as a civilizational fountainhead, as a stable and thriving democracy, with the wherewithal to redefine a world order that for too long has been defined by precepts laid down by a long era of Western dominance that we were subject to from the advent of the age of colonialism, trading companies, empires, and then later the post-1945 global dispensation. I use the concept of dominance to mean that many of us who reside in the global south have been the victims of such dominance in an age of impunity. And we continue to see it today in the weaponization of the dollar, the effect of economic sanctions, the thrust towards regime change with calamitous consequences, as we saw in Iraq and Libya, and the emergence of the doctrine of might is right, as Russia has sought to deploy in Ukraine, taking a cue from the general lawlessness and flouting of sovereignty principles we saw when regime change was pursued in Iraq and Libya. No one country has the right to play God and rain destruction on another. Wokeness pursued by a group of powerful countries cannot be a guiding principle of international relations. Everything has context, and vengeance cannot be the answer. People are at the heart of the world, and they want development, access to resources, connectivity, good governance, greater state capacity to deliver. They want better lives which come from more resources in their hands, skill development, and making lives better for their children. And for a country like India, that realization is founded in the spiritual bedrock of our civilizational values that stress the unity of humankind, the spiritual basis of our cultural underpinnings, the spirit of our Setu Himachalam from Kanyakumari to Srinagar. There is a lot of talk today of whither our foreign policy. Along the way, we have shed the robes of non-alignment. We are unabashed about saying that India's GPS is the calculus of our interests multiplied by our value system, with our goal being to ensure that our boundless energy as a nation is harnessed for all-round development, social and economic, rural and urban, on earth and in space, with equilibrium, with stability, and with responsibility. Democracy is our strength. It is not a hand-me-down from the Western world. It is a product of the Indian agora, that open space defined by millennia of constructive debate, an emphasis on harmony above difference, creating balance and equilibrium, empathy, compassion, and patience. Remember the words datta, dayadvam, damyata, generosity, compassion, and self-control, respecting the right of coexistence with your neighbor, each creating space for the other, understanding the virtues of adaptation, compromise for the overall good, our stress on learning, and the acquisition of greater and greater knowledge to improve lives. These are wonderful values to equip even the world outside our borders and to inspire a global commons. As was said recently, we live in torn times, and we must have the navigational skills to deal with the situation. There is this discontent about globalization. There is the economic and social fallout of the COVID pandemic. There is rising nationalism across the world, and the unleashing of a technological revolution that threatens to leave the many economically or socially disadvantaged behind. This is an age that needs redefinition, by which I mean is not a rejection of globalization and the connections that bind us as humans together, but a more cogent path-finding capacity to make sense of the chaos surrounding us, to rekindle our resilience, our understanding of nuance, the need for flexibility, for tensile strength, and the rejection of narrow insularities. Countries such as ours need stability to grow and prosper. We need the assurance of the steady flow of capital and technology and the capacity to access these resources. We need the preparedness to augment and to ensure our national security. We need more and more modernization built on the bedrock of our civilizational strength, each reinforcing the other. For a vast country like India, built on pluralism and diversity, a nation of nations, we must develop more and more capacity to look beyond the horizon. We can and must be able to contradict shibboleths and received knowledge transmitted to us from beyond our borders, with open minds, always ensuring that the interests of the unknown Indian, women and men who toil in our farm fields, who build the skyscrapers and urban settlements across India, our roads and bridges and tunnels, railroads and metro systems are kept in mind. It is not the age for elitism. It is the age of the unknown Indian. As I said before, this is a world of multi-dimensions, demanding multi-engagement that straddles all these spaces, reaching into cyber and outer space. How do we prepare India for the future that is outside and is already ringing our doorbell? First of all, let us equip ourselves with more openness, the ability to keenly monitor the outside world, keeping our windows open, eschewing narrow economic nationalisms, giving to and taking from the world as our economy multiplies in strength and our trade in physical and digital goods soars. Then let us emphasize the importance of multilateralism in all global forums as a voice for the voiceless, and which in its true and unadulterated form can provide the strength to combat the dominance of the few, the arrogance of power, with strong institutions, with significant representation from the global south, providing the foundational strength of a new international order that reflects our aspirations, our rights, and the preservation of our fundamental civilizational values of inclusion and non-exploitation of either human beings or the environment that sustains our planet. I believe that our vaccine diplomacy in the times of COVID and our reaching out to neighbors like Sri Lanka at the time of critical stress for that country are powerful examples of the voice of a new India. In a similar light, our stand during the current war in Ukraine in regard to the opposing of the weaponization of trade and also against economic sanctions in order to secure the import of oil from Russia is an expression of our sovereign right to choose options and solutions that safeguard our energy needs and the well-being of our people in the time of great global economic stress. This is also the India that has the economic capacity to place orders for 220 passenger aircraft in one go from Boeing and Airbus. This, then, is the advent of our century. Third, let us settle for nothing less than the best solutions for our needs as we develop and grow. Let us build and nurture the best educational institutions, whether schools or teacher training establishments, we really need them, the best and most well-equipped STEM colleges and universities, the best skill development programs networked across the country so that our demography becomes a solid dividend, an unflinching belief and respect for constitutional and democratic values among our youth, and the cultivation of the humanistic spirit among Indians of all denominations. Fourthly, the pursuit of sustainable solutions, especially in regard to the environment. This is embedded in our core set of foundational values as a people and as a culture, and were deployed by the government with excellent effect in the last few multilaterals on climate change and the conferences of parties. We were able to successfully transform ourselves from a naysayer to constructive champions of sustainable solutions against global warming and climate change. That is the way to go. Fifthly, pursue perfection with passion. For instance, designing the India of tomorrow. Urban design, the conceptualization and construction of public spaces, reuniting the wonderful aestheticism embedded in our DNA as a people who crafted our heritage from the stupas of Barhut to the magnificent splendor of Brihadishwara temple, from the gardens of the Shalimar to the minarets of Bijapur and Golconda, and the intrinsic ability we possess as a people to see heaven in every wild flower. Somehow along the way, in the chaos and the mayhem of our lives, we have lost that sense of the aesthetic, and we must rediscover and redeploy it. Most importantly, unfetter our spirit of enterprise as a people. Our state institutions must be key enablers in this respect and allow the floodgates to open. For too long, they have hindered rather than helped. Government's work is God's work. As a creator, as a protector, as the first responder. That awareness must now be ingrained as we pave the road to the future. It has been extremely heartening to note the tremendous achievements registered in delivering what are called population scale platforms at startup pace, like Aadhaar and the UPI, to 1 billion and more strong population. That is a true revolution in state capacity and what digital technologies can do to promote inclusion and development for the people. Public service must be a calling not only for public servants, but also for those in the private sector. There can be no barriers in between. We must understand that the only scarce resource is time, time that runs out and depletes too fast. Calibrate time better and understand how to manage and deploy it better. Let our minds be more neat and less cluttered, and let us forsake labyrinthine argument. Do not misunderstand me. There is a lot going for India today that should make us proud, but not vainglorious. We have miles to go yet, and we must be spurred to do more, drawing hope from what we have achieved so far as a nation in the last 75 years. I live in the city of Bangalore, in the heart of peninsular India, on the Deccan Plateau, that ancient landmass surrounded by two seas and an ocean. Here in the seat of power, Delhi, it seems that there should be more and more awareness of the forward-looking perspective towards the world outside, the thirst for innovation and new ideas that my part of India embodies. Just a look at the billboards will tell you that as a starter if you visit any of the South Indian states. But beyond that, a recent conversation I had with representatives of startups and tech companies in Bangalore was deeply revelatory. These are companies that are at the leading edge of frontier technologies that literally straddle the heavens in quantum computing, in cutting-edge semiconductors and nanotechnologies, skilling young people in quantum technology, in cybersecurity. As one of my interlocutors said, I quote, "Today, everything done globally by my company is done in India," unquote. Democratizing artificial intelligence, literally AI for the citizen, in schools, in healthcare, motivating people to learn, improving our ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities on sea, land, and in the digital space, wanting to rule all dimensions, as someone said. And furthermore, in speech recognition and digital translation, that can be immeasurably useful when we are dealing with threats on our frontiers or insurgencies in other parts of the country, in smart innovation, and finally, embracing space, our final frontier. Everything is being redefined in the world today, and India can and should be at the cusp of such redefinition, becoming a problem solver. Bangalore, in many ways, I feel, is telling us what Make in India means, which further underscores the need for us to invest in our science and technology ecosystem, to nurture talent and to cement our partnerships with those countries who can help us advance our goals in this field. Technology is today's force multiplier in the world, and as we make in India more and more, we must invest in industries of the future and the critical raw materials for these industries, as also developing the ecosystem within the country that can absorb these new technologies. Ours is a largely young country, and the average age hovers around 30, which is a wonderful resource at our command, and which we must harness effectively through education, skill development, and science and technology. The trajectory of our rival and long-term competitor, China, is uncertain today. Its growth is slowing down. It is losing friends and gaining adversaries across the board. Its political system is rigid and inflexible. It stifles debate and dissent. Its population is aging. It could well be caught in a middle-income trap. It is unlikely to overtake the United States as the world's leading economy, in the near term at least. This is a golden hour for India to utilize, to reap the advantage that flows from falling productivity in China, and in removing the regulatory cholesterol that makes doing business in India for foreign investors and businesses notoriously laborious and complex. This is a challenge already receiving attention, and I have no doubt we are addressing it seriously. Our goal is to be independent of dependence, for our essential goods and services on outside countries who are our adversaries, especially in critical technologies and critical manufacturing industries like pharmaceuticals, electronics, and energy. In addition, there is the most important pillar of our national security in a difficult neighborhood, which demands that we engage in proactive defense strategies, building manufacturing capacity in the field, co-development and co-production with international partners, and ensuring a defense machine that is lean and yet technologically advanced and data secure, and constantly improving in delivering capacity. Today, the very nature of warfare and the future of conflict is changing. As someone asked the other day, I quote, "Where do you hide an aircraft carrier?" unquote, when there are adversaries who are watching and surveying you from space. As an aside, you can well imagine the consternation that would ensue if a Chinese surveillance balloon were to be spotted in Indian skies. I think our neighborhood will continue to exert a disrupting influence on our development until and unless tensions abate with China and Pakistan, our two large neighbors, with which we now have seemingly irreconcilable differences. There are no easy prescriptions here. We must keep our powder dry, stay prepared always for contingencies, never back-footed, while keeping focused on our core strategies for national development. I believe also that we need a more responsible political opposition space that is able to understand the national interest in a time of global tension, security threats to the nation, and the core development concerns of our people, rather than exploit every situation for narrow political or sectarian concerns. I say this as a concerned citizen with no ideological agenda at all. The same applies to the media. We need less noise and more substance, more gravitas. India today, I believe, has found its moment, ladies and gentlemen. It is our moment of opportunity, where aspirations and ambitions are at an inflection point, intersecting with capability and capacity, potential and power. The cup is close to the lip, but we must ensure that we are not diverted or deflected from that path. We have been cleared for takeoff, and let the engines roll. Thank you.
Such complex things shared in such simplistic ways. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your motivational words, and would request you to please stay back on the dais. And now, I would like to invite our Dean, Dr. Suneja, to honor the chief guest with a special memento. Sir, if you can please join us over here on the stage. Ma'am, if you can please come back on the dais. It's a very special memento being gifted by our Dean, Dr. Suneja, to our chief guest, Ms. Nirupama Rao. Thank you so much. Now, moving ahead, extending a special thanks to our title sponsor, STL Sterlite Technologies, main sponsor, HUL, who are present today with the brand Horlicks Women Plus, co-sponsors, Star Health, Mirchi, HDFC Ergo, our associate sponsor, Nestle, and India Infra. And of course, would like to show you one of the videos of our sponsor. Can we have the video, please?
Health Insurance started operations in 2006, focusing all its resources on service excellence and well-designed products. Right from our inception, we have always had the customer's best interests in mind.
It's a two objective. One is a service to my ensure keeping them satisfied, happy, subject to policy conditions. Number 2 is to see that my family members are kept comfortable and adequately paid so that they will also be fully satisfied and they will not look at anybody else for any want.
Keeping this as top priority, we have worked diligently on offering a plethora of products at affordable prices in order to make health insurance every individual's right.
At Star Health, we believe that though this is a commercial business, we believe that we are doing something special for the society at large, because it's not only about selling a product, but it's also providing health insurance services. We have captured more than 25% of the retail health insurance market. Now, our aim is to reach every citizen of this country. We want to create a health insurance cover that is available for people of all ages, from newborn to the senior citizen, for all economic strata, from lower socioeconomic class to the elite people, and for people with all diseases.
Students, it's my humble request to please maintain silence throughout this very special celebration. I'm sure you have a lot of takeaway from every session that is being hosted over here. So please maintain silence. Thank you so much. मुझ में कोई विशिष्ट प्रतिभा नहीं है, मुझे केवल जुनून है हद तक पहुंचने की. As quoted by Albert Einstein, these words are so significant to professionals who have dedicated their life to achieve excellence in their field of work. Just like Professor MP Gupta, who is receiving this prestigious Lifetime Achievement Award 2023. Can we please hear it for him? Huge round of applause. Dr. MP Gupta, Professor of Management, has been Head and Dean of Faculty of Management Studies of the University of Delhi and has held several honorable positions and achieved numerous academic accolades. A double master's in economic statistics from Delhi School of Economics and Operation Research from University of Delhi. He also completed graduate courses in operations research from the University of Pennsylvania, USA. He went on to do his doctorate in management from Delhi University. Dr. Gupta has authored various books in the areas of statistics, transportation systems, and operations research. He has joined us over here. Post his retirement from FMS, Dr. Gupta has continued to contribute to the education system by holding leadership roles at various private institutions, including his tenure as the advisor to the Chancellor at Sharda University. He now enjoys his retirement time following his interests such as the global economy and geopolitical events while continuing mentoring those who seek it. Now again, once again, please can we have a huge round of applause for Professor MP Gupta. And before his acceptance speech, I would like to invite Sharma sir to felicitate Dr. Gupta, please. Okay, our Dean is over here, so please, huge round of applause. It's a very special moment and of course a very, very special award which is going towards and now I request him to please deliver his acceptance speech. Sir, if you could please take the mic.
Respected Dean, Professor Vivek Suneja, President FMS Forum, Mr. Rajkumar Sharma, dear colleagues, alumni, students, and friends. It gives me immense pleasure to be part of this August gathering today on the auspicious occasion of FMS Forum Founders Day celebrations. I feel honored to receive Lifetime Achievement Award as the name itself suggests. Receiving this Lifetime Achievement Award makes me reflect upon my past and my lifetime that I dedicated to FMS. As you all may be aware, FMS was started as one of the department at the Delhi School of Economics, University of Delhi, for business management in 1954 under the leadership of Professor Das Gupta. It still leaves me awestruck to think the challenges and notifications, roadblocks Professor Das Gupta must have faced and overcome. At that time, only PG diploma on a theory time basis was given for working executives. I joined FMS in the year 1968 as a young lecturer and of course retired as a grandfather. One of my initial responsibilities at FMS was being involved in designing and introducing decision/management science and allied courses in MBA program. In 1967, FMS new building was also ready, which over a period of time went to become one of the iconic buildings of University of Delhi in India, as many alumni and present students fondly call it the Red Building of Dreams. And why not? FMS is just not an institution, it is an experience that stays with you for a lifetime. During my 37 years of FMS, I not only grew professionally, but also as an individual. FMS nominated me to participate in Advanced Management Program at Zipaka Management Center for Development, Romania. In the year 1991, I was offered a place in the program on strategic approaches to management development and education at Durham University, UK, along with other handpicked directors from across the globe. This gave me an international exposure of teaching methodologies in early years of my professional life. FMS gave me the opportunity to grow as an academician and a teacher by offering conducive environment for understanding numerous research projects, trainings, consultancy, and most important, long hours of teaching. I took over as Dean in January 1991, and I put in my best efforts to ensure that FMS reached greater heights, always acting in the best interest of FMS and the students. During my deanship was increased the intake capacity of full-time from 45 to 90 students at that time. I was fortunate to visit various countries in Europe, USA, Canada, South, East Asia, and Australia to participate in delivering lectures, seminars, and conferences in management education. Big international associations such as EFMD, that is European Foundation for Management Development, and MDSA, Association of Management Development Institution in South Asia. where I got the chance to look back and keep improving, improvising, and moving forward in all respects. But this Lifetime Achievement Award took me back in time, reflect upon the past, and revisit the precious memories of my innings of about 4 decades at FMS. I once again thank the FMS Forum and the alumni for this humbling Guru Shiksha in the form of this Lifetime Achievement Award. I am pleased and humbled to accept this Lifetime Achievement Award wherever I join the past recipients of this award, such as Professor Abad Ahmed, Professor Neela Megam, whom I have always admired and respected. Last but not least, I also want to thank my wife and my family for always being my strength in all my pursuits. Thank you all once again.
Thank you so much, sir. And now I would like to request Dean Dr. Vivek Suneja to honor Professor M.P. Gupta with the citation. And I think this huge round of applause should be a standing ovation. If you can please give this honor to our Professor M.P. Gupta. And also would request Mr. Sundar Hegwajani, founder, president of the FMS Forum, to come on the dais and to honor Professor M.P. Gupta with a special memento. आप लोग की तालियां रुकनी नहीं चाहिए, please. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and would request Mr. Puneet Wadhwa to kindly escort Professor Gupta back to his seat. And students, we are now entering into a very special discussion, something which I'm sure you would love to listen to, and it's my humble request to all the students over here, kindly be seated and make no noise. Thank you so much. Moving ahead, the objective of the panel discussion is to give our young leaders in the audience insight into the opportunities and challenges India as a nation would face over next 25 years. And today we are privileged to have domain experts engaged in dialogue with our moderator, Mr. Parikshit Luthra. Speaking about our moderator, Mr. Parikshit Luthra, he is a distinguished journalist, associate editor at CNBC TV 18. He has over 15 years of experience in the Indian broadcast industry. At CNBC TV 18, Parikshit is responsible for leading the channel's coverage on the automotive sector, trade and foreign policy. He is the host of the channel's weekly show on foreign policy called The Global Eye. Parikshit Luthra has interviewed several global business and political leaders, including US Secretary for Commerce Wilbur Ross, former US Secretary of State John Kerry. Now, let's just put our hands together for Mr. Parikshit Luthra. And of course, our distinguished panelists. Mr. Luthra, if you can please join us with our distinguished panelists over here on the dais, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a great evening so far, a great evening of conversations. And we couldn't have really hoped for a better panel to discuss, is India all set to become the third largest economy? Now, over the last few months, in fact, for the last few years, we've been hearing that this is going to be India's century, this is going to be India's decade. India is going to become the third largest economy by the end of 2030. By the next 10 years. So clearly, it's not a question of whether India will become the third largest economy, but it's a question of how fast and the value addition we make along the way. How do we ensure the prosperity of our own people? How do we ensure the share of manufacturing goes up? And how we make ourselves more resilient to all the global supply shocks we've seen over the last 2 years? Who could have thought about a COVID-like pandemic which has disrupted the world, made us change the way we think, function altogether? Who could have thought that there will be a war, the kind we've been seeing over the last 1 year? We're completing 1 year of the Russia-Ukraine war, and it continues to rattle global supply chains. So lots to think about, and let's open this up. Let me introduce our panel. Mr. Rakesh Mohan, former Deputy Governor of the RBI, President, Distinguished Fellow, Center for Social Economic Progress. Mr. Garg, Mr. S.C. Garg, former Finance Secretary, former Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs at the Finance Ministry. Navteej Sarna, former Indian Ambassador to the United States, UK and Israel, the longest serving spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs as well. Jayant Patil, whole-time Director, Defense and Smart Technologies at L&T, someone who's really seen India foray into the defense manufacturing industry, and he's seen this journey from the 1980s very, very closely. Mr. Harshvardhan Singh, former Deputy Director General of the WTO, Secretary TRI and Chairman IGDWAJ Advisors as well. So let's open this up with you, Mr. Rakesh Mohan. As we were discussing earlier as well, India will reach the milestone of the third largest economy. But the question is, how can we make it faster? And if you were to tell the audience about what we need to add value as far as our own people are concerned, the strength of India in global supply chains is concerned, what would those recommendations be?
Thank you very much, Parikshit, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me here. On the first question, it is inevitable that we will become the third largest economy, given the differences in the rates of growth of the current second and third largest economies and what we should have in the future. But what I would say is that why does that matter to us? Why are we worried about becoming the third largest economy just because we have 1.4 billion people as opposed to most other countries except for China, which are less than 300 or so? What is much more important really is that we need to raise the living standards of all Indians, to remind ourselves that even though we are presiding over the G20 this year, we are indeed by per capita income the lowest income economy per capita in the G20. Therefore, I believe it's much, much more important to press the growth accelerator so that we can increase our incomes and levels of living in all aspects much faster. Just to give a sense of where we are, our per capita income is little over $2,000 US dollars per year. Thailand is about 8 to 9,000. China is about 10 to 12,000. So we can't be satisfied where we are. We have to redouble our efforts to grow further. What this also means is that we must grow at least at 7% a year per capita income, which means 8% GDP or something like that. As FFS students, you will know, of course, that at 7% you double in 10 years. So what this means is that by around 2040, that is 18, 20 years from now, we will be at the income level of where Thailand is today. So therefore, it's even more urgent that we redouble our efforts in everything that we do. The first thing that I would say is that we've done very well in many, many aspects in the 75 years of our independence. What we've not done well is indeed health, education, and nutrition. In health, for example, I'm sorry, I'm giving not the brightest or happiest of remarks, but I do think these are very important as we
Important to have conversations on these points.
yeah. That, for example, in health, we had in one of your sponsors, health insurance. The fact of the matter is that India has the highest out-of-pocket expenditures. That is what people have to spend, because most people are neither covered by the government nor health insurance. Of course, there are a number of new schemes that have indeed been put forward by the government, which I hope will make a difference. But the basic point is, these are the areas that we have neglected the most in the last 75 years. And therefore, this is where we need to concentrate. On the brighter side, of course, there's been a huge expansion in education, absolutely amazing expansion in education at all levels in the last 20 years. What that means is that we can now do it. We just have to improve the quality of education, but the huge expansion that has taken place, primary, secondary, I think we now probably graduate more students with the BA than I think even China are about the same. Even more important actually is that now the number of female students who graduate with the BA is greater than male students. Of course, there's a difference in which areas they are in. But that again, these are all very, very positive things. And therefore, if we put our minds to it, we can do much more, because just like the COVID vaccination that was done in 21-22, once we put our mind to anything, we can do it. So that's number one. That is health. Health and education. Also nutrition. We have had significant nutrition programs for a long time. We have to redouble them. I don't want to take too much time, but I do want to address the last point that you made. One of the strangest things that has happened in the 30 years plus of economic reforms, that we have not increased employment in manufacturing much. Our organized sector employment manufacturing is only about 15 million or thereabouts. At least 10 years ago, I don't know how much it is now, China's was 100 to 120 billion. And that is where we really need to concentrate, is on generating high quality jobs. And of course, service sector jobs will grow pari passu along with that. And to do that, we really have to find, I have to admit that I've not been able to understand why this hasn't happened, given the factor price comparative advantage that we have in terms of labor costs. So I don't understand it, but because among the other part of health, education, nutrition, the connected problem is of employment, is absolutely of employment. And we just have not concentrated at all on labor using industries. And the record of almost all the countries to the east of us is exactly that they concentrated labor using industries. And of course, they've gone up the ladder in terms of technology. I'll stop here so that I don't take all the time.
Not at all. Wonderful hearing those views, sir. I'll get in Mr. Garg now. Mr. Garg, I know, would largely agree with you. Mr. Garg, just to open this up, get you into the discussion, when it comes to the question of reaching the third largest economy, if I were to ask you about some of the factors which can take us there faster, and along with that, what should we not lose sight of?
So, thank you very much. I think when we talk about third largest economy, we normally refer to crossing the Japanese economy, which is about 5
Germany and Japan.
Germany is about less than $4 trillion. Japan is the largest economy there. So 5 trillion, which is also in a way described as the national goal these days. So you cross 5 trillion, then you become the third largest economy. I don't think we consciously or unconsciously even refer that we should aim at becoming second largest, because that seems to be too far. 15 trillion or 16 trillion is what the Chinese economy today has become. I don't know why we don't aim at that. Is it our limited ambition, or we are satisfied just being third largest? And to become third largest, to take up your question now, just incidentally let me mention, for much of the millennium, much of the human existence on earth, India was the second largest economy. In the entire agricultural age, until the industrial revolution started in the 18th century, India was the second largest economy, and not only second largest, it was about 25% of the global GDP. So you were at that level. Even at the time of independence, when we came out of this colonial past, we were the fifth largest economy. So I don't think we should be sort of placing too much sort of weight around becoming third or fourth or fifth. What matters to me, and what Dr. Mohan was also saying, is that what do we get there? If you want to become a upper middle income economy today, that's about $12,000 income per capita, you are required to become a $20 trillion economy. And if you are not aiming that, you're probably not aiming at sort of lifting our people and giving them, or allowing them to have the living standards which are of the high income countries. To get there, I think we will need to make very fundamental reforms. I think much of what Dr. Mohan was saying about manufacturing growth and all, that was for the industrial age. That, to my mind, is by and large gone. Much of the industrial production globally now has been achieved. Today, in most of the industrial goods, you are actually in surplus production than the demand. And therefore, whether you produce for your own or produce for exports, you are not going to get to become a very rich country by pursuing the path there. The opportunities are, number one, our agriculture. We are, about 50% of Indians are trapped in agriculture with a very low income future. Globally, the agriculture supports only about 2 to 5% people. If we need to get them, and industry cannot really support you now, so what is the future which can support you? The future is basically in 3 areas. Number one, big services expansion. Services, you are now witnessing even the social interactions being commercialized. What is Twitter? What is Facebook? What are these? These businesses are not traditional service, but you are sort of converting a lot of social interactions and into the businesses. So you expand the services, and there is an enormous advantage we have in those services space, whether it's accounting, legal, information technology, personal services, education, health, and that can absorb much of our labor as well. So that's one. Second, we must get infrastructure. Not only the physical infrastructure on which the government is doing enormous amount of investment, whether it is the rail transportation or road transportation or metros and those kind of things, but much of the digital infrastructure which is required for the future economy, and the living infrastructure which is required for people's life to become better. And lastly, I think we must siege the opportunities which is the future opportunity in the digital space, there in all its 4 segments, whether it's the chips, whether it is the codes, or whether it is the networks and the services. We have done well in services only. But we have not done well in the chips, codes and networks. There we are far behind the two most advanced countries in the world. If we can seize that advantage, perhaps we'll reach to not only the third largest economy with $5 trillion in GDP, probably $10 to $15 trillions. In 40 years' time, nations have changed from the low-income economies to the very high-income economies. China took 40 years. Most of the Europe took 40 years. We'll not wait 21st century to be entirely used for doing this. If we pursue the right kind of policies, 40 years are enough, 40 to 50 years, for India to become a high-income country. Thank you.
So I know Rakesh Mohan has a counterpoint. Mr. Mohan would like to come in.
It is often said that we've missed the manufacturing bus. Subhash, you couldn't be more wrong on that issue. Just remember, there are about 3 billion plus people to the east of us. Their incomes are going to grow much faster than countries to the west of us. And the per capita incomes range from around $4,000–5,000 to Japan, of course, $50,000 or thereabouts. The point is, for the next 20–30 years, all these people will be buying 5 shirts each extra, 5 pairs of shoes extra, sofas, houses, cutlery, cooking stuff, food materials, processed food. So you couldn't be more wrong, Subhash. The demand for manufacturing goods is continuing to grow. For the next 30–40 years, we better look east. We keep looking at west. They're not going to grow. They have enough manufactured goods. So, we've missed many buses. Don't make us lose this bus. Your services will not grow either if you miss this bus.
Okay, it's only fair that we give Mr. Garg a chance to respond.
So, I entirely agree to the point that there was great opportunities on manufacturing space. I also agree that we missed, but I don't agree to that we still have big opportunities. Let me tell you, in 1950s, we had opportunity on the manufacturing space. The Japans of the world cornered it. In 60s, we had the opportunities. Koreans and the Taiwanese of the world cornered it. In 80s, we had the opportunities. Chinese took it away. Today also we have opportunities, but not in textiles and the toys and the small ones. We have big opportunities in the semiconductors manufacturing, in the chips manufacturing, etc. And that is where today the Vietnams of the world are competing you out. You are not able to compete with Vietnam. I won't be surprised. Vietnam is a small country, but if it emerges as the next manufacturing sort of post of the world instead of India, this China plus one policy provided enormous opportunities to a lot of countries, including India. But what much we have taken? We have not taken much. Instead, the Vietnams of the world are taking. So I would love India to avail the manufacturing opportunities.
Okay.
But whether we can do it or not is the question.
So your view is we can't match Vietnam?
We are not matching. Electronics, 13 times Vietnam has already made its production. India's 13 times is the electronics production of Vietnam today.
All right. Vietnam definitely has those advantages when it comes to electronics manufacturing. It has a large number of trade agreements with other countries as well. But let's open this up. Some very interesting thoughts from Mr. Rakesh Mohan and S.E. Garg. Very healthy debate. So a round of applause here as well. And all our students up there, don't lose focus. Keep attention on this panel. We're looking at you. We'll be coming to you for questions. So keep thinking about your questions. Keep noting down your points. We'll be coming to you in some time from now. Ambassador Sarna, if I can come to you. The pandemic really made countries, companies think of a China plus one strategy. They realize you can't put your eggs in one basket. India has been closely wooed by countries, by companies over the last 2 to 3 years. But everyone says this opportunity will not stay forever. How are stars aligned for India at the moment, and what should we do to leverage this geopolitical opportunity?
Thank you, Parikshit, for throwing me what in cricket is called a long hop. Because I was wondering what I'm going to do if you start asking me about manufacturing and services and other complicated things. I think I had in mind a point which you have actually encapsulated in your question, and some of the themes are already touched upon by the memorial lecture given by our chief guest, Mrs. Rao. I think whether we reach the third spot or the second spot and when do we reach it, etc., that's something which I will leave for experts. But I want to say that this is not a stadium or a racetrack on which we are running alone. This is not just us. We are part of a world. We are part of several competitors. We are part of several partners. So we have to look at what is happening around us and what has brought us to this stage that we are beginning to talk of this. Yes, there are objective factors like our size, our scale, our demography, our growth projections of 7% and so on, our deep domestic demand and all that. But the geopolitical impact of what's happening in the world on our economy or our economic potential and the dangers of geopolitical developments to our economic potential can't be discounted. So the question you asked is like, how long is this going to stay? I don't know, because there are two factors, if you see, which have happened over the last 3 or 4 years, which we have seen, have actually brought more focus on India, have brought all those guests to India. People are looking at us in a different light. One was the pandemic, and not the pandemic and the damage it caused, but what it did to China's standing in the world. There is a deterioration in the trust factor as regards China. The second development is, of course, the Ukraine war or Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And what has that done? It has shown that, the accepted direction of the international liberal world order, whatever we call it, is disrupted, is no longer happening. We are back to the balance of power situation. We are back to geopolitical rivalries. Now, when you're back to that, there are times which will be good for you if you're at the right spot of things. I mean, it's been called that India's at the sweet spot at the moment, sweet spot of your racket, or given the Kotla test is going on, sweet spot of your cricket bat. But you just don't play only with your sweet spot. You don't know what's going to happen with the new ball. You don't know what's going to happen to the pitch. And that's exactly what's happening. We have a window. We have a window because people are looking at an alternative location to China, quite simply put. Whether we call it supply chain, whether we call it friend-shoring, whether we call it resilient supply chain, it's basically the same thing. Can India replace China in certain things? Now, we have a window, and how long that window will last depends on what happens to US-China, what happens to China's attitudes towards how it behaves with the Indo-Pacific and other places. And the second thing is, given the geopolitical mad rush, the rivalries in the wake of the Ukraine conflict, the second point is how quickly are we able, or how well are we able to balance our relationships? And it's called strategic autonomy, whether we call it non-alignment 2.0, but the basic thing is we need all our relationships. And there will be a point when, there's a point to which we can play in this narrow space. There will be points when this narrow space gets too narrow for us. But by that time, hopefully, things will be better. And while we are playing this whole chess game around, we have to be building internal strengths. And you make make your internal strengths to a point that you become more important to the other person than his concerns about his enemy who's also dealing with you. That is the essence of strategic autonomy. I don't know if this makes sense, but I'm happy to chat whenever you come back to me. Thanks.
You know, that's an important point, Mr. Sarna, because when you spoke about making ourselves stronger, we saw this during the pandemic, how there was a global shortage of chips, and we suffered. We saw prices of electronic items, cars, all going up every month. But if there's someone who can really detail India's export strategy over the years, India's trade relations, a lot of initiatives that you see towards pushing more exports, a lot of this has been overseen by Mr. Harshvardhan Singh over the last 10 to 15 years. Mr. Singh, thank you. Thank you for being with us on this panel. India is an export-driven economy. When we speak about India versus Vietnam, there is this debate which is here on this panel and also in the media that Vietnam is giving us a run for our money. How do we drive our exports more? We've seen a PLI policy, we've seen the national logistics policy, we've seen the Gati Shakti, and many other PLI schemes are in the works. But as we push our exports, how do we make ourselves more resilient as well? How do we play a bigger role in global supply chains?
Thank you, Mr. Luthra. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. I want to congratulate FMS and Professor MP Gupta on this very special occasion. As far as your question is concerned, I just want to go back a little bit to the conversation which was going on earlier. And there were some very important comments made. I'll start with Ambassador Navtej Sarna's comment that we have to make ourselves strong internally. That there's no option to that. How, where becomes the issue. So if I think in terms of concentric circles of options which we got to take, that is the core inner circle. And how you enable yourself. And the example of Vietnam was given and how it's grown a lot in terms of electronics. So basically, when we think of countries competing, competition is of two different types. And Dr. Rakesh Mohan talked about employment in manufacturing being stagnant. The reason is, if you just focus on your internal market as the marketplace which you'll use as the instrument for growth, you're not going to grow too much with that. However rapidly your GDP is going, because others who are becoming more competitive to you will also try and get access to that. So it is getting more competitive vis-a-vis others. You got to focus on your market and the external market. You were talking about exports. And India is a large economy and a large country in terms of number of people. So you are running in this race with a weight around your neck, because huge demands are made on the products you produce. To that extent, in order to enable your producers to look outside, you have to devise strategies which focus on scale. For that, the insights that countries do wish to compete, but it is companies which compete. And that is the strategy which was used by Vietnam. Of course, it's a small economy. In terms of number of people, it's just about 9% of India. So if you produce in scale in Vietnam, you basically will export most of it. It exports more than 90% of its electronics products, which it makes. For us to reach that scale, we have to actually go beyond our domestic market. And for that, you need to rely on the global value chains, global supply chains, their location here, which means you need to improve the policy for investment, you need to improve whatever else is involved in that supply chain. So it's a configuration of policies, which for a country like Vietnam, first of all, it focused on it. Second, it implemented it. A lot of policies, India has made a lot of very good policies. We do not ensure that it is effectively implemented on the ground. So, one, I'm pleased to say that the government is focusing on this. It is looking at the key constraints which are faced in this context. You talked about PLI, you talked about some of the other policies. They are very young. It's, this year is the first year any PLI beneficiary is actually starting to get money. So give it some chance, give it time, but during that time, be a partner. What has been the lesson from China, a big country, and Vietnam, a small country, is that a policy maker has to think in terms of what is required for that competing company. But the policymaker has to take the country along. We talked about health. So when you're talking about the whole toolbox of policy, you have multiple objectives. You have to tick every box. But if you don't have a high income, you will find it very difficult. Becoming the third largest economy is a given. I mean, that's a journey we are very well on. If you see IMF growth forecast, we will become the third largest economy in the world in 2027. Fourth largest in 2025. India, the government of India has focused on 3 dates, which are very important in my view. One is 2030. One is 2047, the Amrit Kal as it's being called. And one is 2070, by when we aim to be carbon neutral. So in this entire journey, at least you mentioned exports are being emphasized now. And I see a change in terms of the position of the Prime Minister in the speech he gave in 2021, 6th August, where he said India must have a large share of global exports and a large share of global supply chains. Nobody had even thought about this or conceptualized it earlier because we are export pessimistic. So that turn is taking place. It requires a shift in major ways. If along the way a geopolitical difficult situation comes up, we might be derailed. But I think given the linkages we have created, given the geopolitical situation today, we are better placed, given the economic policy turn which we are taking, we are better placed. And we have to then identify, because what did these countries which succeeded in export do? They identified priority sectors. They worked for the economy as a whole to make it more competitive, but they worked specifically to enable the functioning of those priority sectors. And that's what we have started to do. If we can implement those policies on the ground, we will continue to do well.
All right. Thanks for those opening remarks, Mr. Singh. Let's get in Mr. Jayant Patil at this point. Mr. Patil is someone who's seen the defense industry very closely over the last 4 decades. Now, the way we have placed Mr. Patil with tensions with Pakistan, tensions with China, India is investing a lot in indigenization, Atmanirbharta in defense. When it comes to the defense industry having a greater share in the manufacturing GDP, in the creation of jobs, do you think the time has come? And if we were to ask you for a roadmap, that in the next 10 years, what will be the share of the defense industry in the manufacturing GDP? What would that be?
Thank you, Parikshit. Let me begin by saying that the entire purpose of the defense, when we specifically talk about India, has been to build. We have seen one learning I pick up out of the latest what is happening in the world. The Ukrainians gave away their capabilities, which were differentiating them, and exactly few decades later, they're in current situation where they are. Now, this is essentially where we see that some of those capabilities need to be within, and that's essentially where I see about a decade back a substantial change from what India was following. In our case, till about a decade back, the default acquisition or acquisition of a certain capability, the default options were always to buy from anywhere in the world. So our default options of acquisition were necessarily the buy global. This is dramatically changed, and today the buy global is the last option, and 85% of what is happening in this country is in the Indian basket. Now, not that Indian organizations have every possible capability, and that's where it becomes extremely important when we talk of a roadmap. These capabilities are today being built and being facilitated to be built. We see a sea change somewhere around 2016. From that day, if I look at last about 6 to 7 years, our acquisition has more than doubled. The contribution of Indian industry into what defense used to buy has more than doubled in real numbers also. So it's essentially 4 times. Now, this is what is creating a huge amount of manufacturing industry. I remember till 2012 to 17, the 5th plan that was getting discussed, defense revenues were not even part of the planning process. And from that stage, today when we start looking, if I do back of the envelope calculation, what we spend on defense through varieties of revenue mechanisms of Government of India, slightly short of it, you actually recoup back in the form of GDP, and the capital acquisition that you actually spend more or less comes in the form of the tax revenue. Now, this is in a way a zero-sum game. You spend, you get it back. Spend within the country makes all the difference, and that's where enormous amount of capability generation is something which is happening. N number of policies I can keep rattling and talking about, which we have talked in multiple other previous or one-to-one kind of interviews and sessions. But one very clear directional thing what one notices is we're trying to grow this market from typically 45-50% which used to be India's share, and I remember a little back if I go, 30% used to be what India used to produce for its own defense. This year's budget allocates 75% on a much larger base. Now, this is where we realize that we are not going to be only look after the land, seas and the air, but we need to start looking at the cyberspace which Ambassador Rao talked about. And the last obviously was the focus on industry, and that's where this industry directly relates to the manufacturing. Now, I see very clearly one big difference between the service economy and industrial manufacturing. Having been in the industrial domain for more than 4.5 decades, one man does not create too many jobs in service. One man in manufacturing at the top end actually creates 7 to 8 jobs. So we are actually creating a multiplier of a very sizable magnitude when we are doing manufacturing, and specific to defense, besides just the economics aspect of it, we are actually building those capabilities. Now, what is that the government is, some of those extremely powerful steps they have taken. Research in defense used to be a state subject. Defense manufacturing was itself a state subject in the past. Now, that opened up research in, funding of research for building tomorrow's capabilities is actually opened up now for anybody. Whosoever has an idea can actually come up. Now, that lays that roadmap to where we want to be. We want to be typically about 10 years from now into a scenario where possibly there's hardly anything that we would buy, except for possibly some of those aspects which other panelists have very rightly talked about. There are a few buses we have missed. Some of those buses, if we don't embark onto now, we possibly will remain dependent only for that. But the knowledge aspect of building those capabilities, the embedded knowledge, the intelligence which goes into our systems, that's all going to be Indian. And that's where you would actually have that strategic kind of independence to that extent, deciding everything on our own. We see this happening when we start talking about what's today's India's position. We are able to take our own position very independently. Now, add a military muscle to that, and it dramatically will change scenario. We would also be in a position to assert. Today we see somebody asserting one policeman kind of a scenario in the world today. Obviously, if we have to aim beyond that number 3, we have to be there. And that's essentially I look at in terms of what is happening and the contribution which the 6th arm, as we say, the defense industry becomes the 6th arm beyond the land, the sea, the air, the cyber, the space, and then of course the industry in terms of where we want to take the nation.
All right. Thank you very much for that roadmap, Mr. Patil. If we can now bring Mr. Mohan back in. And Mr. Mohan, last year in an interview had said that the kind of uncertainty that we're seeing globally right now, we've not seen this kind of uncertainty in almost 4 decades, if I'm right, Mr. Mohan. If we speak about the short-term challenges, current account deficit, inflation, and the long-term challenges that you see, where are the areas, which would be the areas where we need to make ourselves the most resilient, Mr. Mohan?
This is working. Thank you, Parikshit. First, on the short-term challenges, I think that we must acknowledge that we have been among the best countries in terms of coping with the challenges that have occurred in the world in the last 3 years. I have to admit that I was critical of the government in 2020-21 when I felt that the government was not spending enough to help people cope with COVID. I've revised my view since then. So I think that we were among the more responsible countries in terms of fiscal expenditure. And as a consequence of that, whereas they say even the most developed countries, all of Europe, the UK, the US, etc., spend something like 10% of the GDP in addition to the normal. And that resulted in huge, very high inflation rates there, like 8, 9, 10%. Britain has 11 or 12%, if I remember correctly right now. And we have escaped all that. So I think that we must be proud of our macro management skills that we've displayed both in the government as in the and the Reserve Bank of India. So we have those skills to manage these kind of things. Now, number one. Number two, yes, one of the key challenges facing us, and I fully agree with my friend Harsh on the focus on exports. I won't talk about the things that I don't agree with him. That'll take too long. And won't have time for the debate. But let me just say that I agree with him about 70% of what he said, but essentially to focus on exports. And the point is that no country has grown fast without high export growth. Whether it was Japan in the 50s, as Subhash said, whether it was Korea in the late 60s, 70s, and whether it was China later. So no country, to my knowledge, has grown fast without high export growth. So so now in that context, related to your question, the uncertainty now is that the likelihood of Western demand going up much is not high, and especially the next 2-3 years, they have too many problems. In the context of what Navtej said on the changing geopolitics in the world, I'll add the changing geoeconomics of the world, that after 200 years plus, the center of this, something that Subhash also referred to, the center of gravity of the global economy is finally in the process of shifting from what I would call the Atlantic Ocean to somewhere between the Indian and Pacific Ocean. And that doesn't happen, very quickly, but that's what's exactly what is happening. And this is where geopolitics comes in because of the new competition between China and the US. And so it's going to cause huge geo-economic problems, management of the global economy, the overall liberal order in economics as well as in politics. So it's going to be very troublesome. Remember, when the last such transition took place was somewhere between before the First World War and the Second World War, where the big power changed from the UK to the US. It took about 30, 40 years. And remember what happened during that time, 2 world wars. I hope that we have learned from that. We don't have 2 world wars of stage. We'll have to people like you with your skills in the diplomatic services across the world. So this is just a slight longish answer that this is a big, that because of a global slowdown, export growth will be more difficult. Therefore, we have to do what Harsh is saying, that we really concentrate on promoting exports. In terms of what we need to do, Subhash said manufacturing Korea, Japan in the 50s, Korea in the 60s, 70s, China in the 80s. What was different? Why could we do it then? The difference, look at all their health and education indicators at the time that they took off so that they had enough people to do what had to be done. In that context, since this is an educational institution, let me also say on our side, notice that despite the fact that's a key problem, none of the other panelists have mentioned health or education or nutrition as a priority. And you can't grow semiconductors if you don't have R&D. You have 40% vacancies in the faculties of IITs. Forget the lesser colleges. Delhi University, I don't know how many vacancies, I think it must have about 30, 40% also, Mr. Suneja. You said you hired 23 people last year. So, these are the things that we have to concentrate on, make sure medical colleges have, the new aims have about 70, 80% of vacancies. You can't find medical teachers. How are we going to staff? So my point I'm just saying is, we really have to concentrate on human capital, human development. Everything else will follow. Now, I just wanted to give say, Mr. Patil, L&T is really among our best firms in terms of ethics, in terms of their production, in terms of the technologies they've developed, and all has been done internally. And I think so. I'm really happy that you are here on the panel, because L&T is the kind of firm which we have to encourage more and more. I can speak longer if you want, but I think I'll shut up now.
Lots to think about, and I think those points on human capital, you've spoken about them earlier, but R&D, this is something that the industry has also been saying, that we need to increase R&D spends if we need to spur an innovation culture in the country.
Yes, since you asked me, I'll speak again. This is again a puzzle to me, that the R&D, total R&D as a percentage of GDP is actually lower today than it was 30 years ago, both in the public sector and the private sector. I don't quite understand why this is happening, because what we had thought when we were doing the 91 reforms, that with greater competition, industry would do more R&D. To give an example, the highest proportion of R&D as a proportion of revenue in the farm is, I think, probably Biocon, which is about 12% of their revenue. I'm told that the investors are complaining, why are you spending so much in 12%? Why are you spending so much on R&D? Give us more profits. Okay, so that's an issue. That's very interesting, actually. Compared to that, the world average for pharma companies, is 16% of revenue. Our best is 12%. So you're absolutely right that I don't know how to get it done. My friend Naushad Forbes, who used to be president of CII, he's also a researcher and a professor on this issue. And he has been writing on this, I think, one of the best stuff written. So those students who are interested in this, look up Naushad Forbes on your Naushad Forbes in your Google, and you'll find him. Read about this. I don't have an answer on why Indian industry does not invest in R&D. Even our fancy, great IT companies, including Infosys, including Wipro, including TCS, do not spend much on R&D. That's why they don't produce products.
All right. We have an industry representative on our panel. We will take this question to Mr. Patil. But before that, the competition with China. And Mr. Sarna, Ambassador Sarna, you've been asked this question before. The tensions with China, they have been weighing us down. We have very heavy deployments at the border, and the border tensions with China, we've had a long-standing boundary dispute, but what happened after the Galwan tragedy, after the Galwan clashes, the tension has continued. The eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation in many sectors along the LAC. When you have a neighbor like that, when you have tensions like that, how do you manage the relationship to make sure that your own economic goals, your economic milestones don't get derailed?
Well, you know, there are no prescriptions at the moment because the way we manage the relationship with China, and again, you know, you have a genuine China expert in Mrs. Rao sitting here, but I think the way we managed it, because we had managed to reach a situation where India and China decided to get on with the business of being, if not good, then relatively non-troublesome neighbors for a while both of them carried on their development, etc. Now, all that has actually been thrown to the winds by China. And this is part of China's new muscular, aggressive stance that it has taken. Now, how far it can carry on that stance? When does it choose and pick and choose to open one problem or the other? Is it the border with India? Or is it Taiwan, etc., or other places? It's difficult to say at the moment. But what I want to say in response to your question is that we have to manage these relationships, and not only with China, but the entire neighborhood. There is no other way that we can move, successfully on the economic and socio-economic development by leaps and bounds if we are going to be bound down by problems in our neighborhood.
Especially when we have an economic crisis all over, Pakistan, Sri Lanka.
Yes, and China is not simply, it's not just Galwan or it's not just Doklam. China is active in all our neighboring countries. And this can be a consistent pull down to your economy. So a successful neighborhood policy is part and parcel of, or an essential part and parcel of a successful foreign policy. Even before we start looking at geopolitical rivalries between Russia and the US and China and the US, our own neighborhood, what has been called, that we need what is called a peaceful periphery if we have to look beyond that. It's easier said than done. Because where there is instability in the smaller neighbors, and that is going to be a problem. So that's part of our diplomatic task.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Sarna. Mr. Patil, if I can get you in at this point, Mr. Mohan had spoken about the need for greater R&D spends. This has been an ask from the defense industry as well, even ahead of this budget. Have greater R&D investments for the Indian defense industry if you want to grow, if you want to innovate in the defense sector. Why do you think this has not been happening, not just in the defense sector, but across the industry? And what more can the industry do on that front?
I think on the strategic sectors, which includes obviously defense, enormous amount of R&D primarily has been in the public sector. It's the government-sponsored R&D. Huge amount of budgets actually have been committed right across the three, the nuclear, space and defense, which primarily remained. The first sector out of them genuinely being opened is now the defense. Now, this is essentially a backdrop. Second, I don't think today there's any incentivization if somebody wants to do too forward an R&D and create a product and want to approach somebody that I have a product, will you buy? We have a policy today which essentially says I cannot buy from you because you are a single party. I think our processes within the government need enormous amount of maturity to come in, and one way this maturity has to come in is if this funding was now thrown open to people, because my belief is efficiencies are completely different in different sectors and segments, and those efficiencies will actually start delivering result if it was open. Defense is the first place where the government has done it. I'm sure space is just about opening. Nuclear would be next to follow. But on the incentivization, I remember specific year 2014-15 when all incentives for the research in industry were taken away by the government. Now, this is typically of thing that there are few organizations who want to spend sizable money. Now, you better pay it through your PAT. And you are now telling that don't return it to the shareholder. And this is essentially where we see the dilemma of an industrialist. What do I do? If I do something state of the art and something completely different, am I going to look at somebody going to be buying? Because in defense and the strategic sectors, there's one customer. If there were multiple customers, we didn't even have an export policy. Till 16, we couldn't have exported. Now, policy actually got created and export started happening, and we have done typically 15, 16 times growth in defense exports in last 7 years. Now, this is essentially where the power of policy and the power of taking it away from the hands, I think we need to put our act together, and that's essentially where it can happen. Today, there's a very clear focus that the government is paying attention to that. That's the reason I talked about the sixth arm. Now, we also realize that if I keep importing, any day I can be stopped usage of that equipment in the days of what we keep talking, the IoT, the AIs. You buy an equipment from outside, the day you want to push the trigger won't function. Take it from me, that's exactly where the technology in the world today is. So you better build it. To build it, better do R&D. But then if I do R&D, there has to be a single party acquisition. Manohar Parrikar was the first minister who really understood this, enabled a policy, and we just heard my colleague saying, we have great policies, we failed in implementation. I think some of these are those cases. The implementation truly has to start happening. And obviously, wherever there is an opportunity, industry always finds money. We will pump in money when it is needed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the students at the back, we're going to come to you in just about 10 minutes from now. So please keep your questions ready. We will ask you to raise your hands for those questions. I'll take my final comments from Mr. Garg and Mr. Singh. Mr. Garg, coming to you. The Prime Minister has spoken about how energy transition, how green hydrogen, how clean energy, biofuels are very critical to India becoming the third largest economy. How important is it to get this mix absolutely right? And we've spoken about PLI schemes. We've spoken about the national logistics policy. We've heard about Gati Shakti. What's the focus that's missing in our toolkit to make ourselves a greater manufacturing destination, to attract more investments and play a greater role in value chains?
So the power sector is very important, or energy sector is very important for the industrial competitiveness also. We've done a lot in doing ease of business, but the cost of doing business and the competitiveness of doing business is critically dependent upon the power sector. The fact that we sell our power at the costliest rate to the industry makes it much less competitive across the world. The big issue there, I think we are talking about renewables, hydrogens, and many other things, but the biggest elephant in the room which we are not addressing is the profitability or even survivability of the DISCOMs. The distribution companies in India lose about 2 lakh crores out of 7 lakh crores of the total power sector sort of value added and of the value of the electricity they produce. And that makes everything go problematic. They don't supply, even the private sector which produces the power at much lesser cost is subjected to cross subsidy charges and many other things. And therefore, until we bring basic reforms, smart meterings, etc., can bring some marginal reforms, but or advantages, but not solve the big problem. So that is the big issue. Likewise, in the other energy space, the oil, gas, etc., we are hugely dependent on the imports. We don't have, whether it's, and we are expanding enormously the gas economy, but again, that's all, even our fertilizers and other production is dependent upon the import of gas. There, how do we handle this thing that we'll continue to be big dependent on that? Alternatively, can electricity take some part of that load? But electricity, if we don't solve the problem which I just described to you, we have a catch-22 situation. So that is, to my mind, a big straight jacket where we have got into and we are not able to come about. The PLI is, again, is an attempt to take away or sort of bypass the general lack of competitiveness. When we say that in this industry we'll give you 6 or 5 or 7% advantage, what we are saying is that to that extent you are generally non-competitive in the country and therefore we'll take care. If you focus on some critical areas where the multiplier effects in terms of production would be much more in times to come, we'll probably do, for example, in the mobiles and that kind of thing, where we have created the big industrial database, though still our value add in that sector is much smaller than for our comfort. And in that sense, the incentive as a percentage of the value add turns out to be much more attractive. That's what brings a lot of industry over there. But if we expand this to very traditional sectors like textiles, air conditioners and many others, very small white goods and things, that is not going to solve the problem. We simply can't put the general non-competitiveness under the carpet by sort of providing some PLI support somewhere there. I think a lot of more strategic thinking and much more focus for the future is what is required to be done, rather than trying to change or solve some small problem somewhere.
Right. Deglobalization and protectionism. How would you address these concerns, Mr. Singh?
Thank you very much. Can I just weave a few things together and then approach it?
Sure, absolutely.
Because when I listen to all the various points, there are some priority issues, and you talked about that with Dr. Rakesh Mohan. And I completely agree with him about the prioritization and emphasis we need to give to health, education, nutrition, etc. We have to learn lessons from those who have actually done well. We talked about R&D, etc. You know, there is a method in the path they took. So when you see the rapidly growing or the flying geese kind of pattern, the newly industrialized countries, etc., many terms are used for those economies which are now becoming the center of gravity. They accompanied their economic growth. In fact, they preceded their economic growth with efforts at gender mainstreaming, improving health and food availability, and education. The second problem, and you know, so if you think in terms of what are our main problems, one is employment, Second is these key variables which we have to address. And third is time. Actually, we don't have as much time as they had. So we have to focus on the larger picture to empower ourselves, and then we have to identify key areas where their growth can be managed, not ordered, managed as one of the stakeholders through supportive policies. And the whole focus has to be to see everything through the filter of competitiveness. Is your effort harming or helping our increase in competitiveness? And you had asked me about exports earlier. There is a different set of policies which make you focus outside. I talked about scale. In defense industry also we talked about scale. In wherever you don't build scale, you will have no R&D. You will have no employment growth. So you have to sustain those things. And it's in that context that, and the other point which you made about strategic thinking, India is the only large country which does not do strategic thinking about its engagement with the global markets. We have to change that in an integrated manner. I think that change is coming. So when we look at the efforts which are required, those steps have started happening now. But as I said, are they happening on the ground? There are structural weaknesses in certain sectors like power. So you have to address the big ticket issues at the same time as you are addressing the larger elements of the game. And in that context, globalization or deglobalization, as you talk about it, is one of the big ticket issues, because your objective of growth is linked to your performance there. Your domestic market is not the answer. So if that is happening, what is happening is that people are in the post-COVID period and the post-Trump kind of policy changes which took place, realize that they cannot take policy stability and supply to be as granted. The shifts there is we are now in an adjustment period where we are also trying to focus on the resilience of global value chains. So you have initiatives. India is a part of those initiatives. How to make things more resilient. Part of that is actually growing your own capability at home. But as in any insurance policy, you have to have your eggs in multiple baskets and see which basket will the egg really be safe. And those efforts also include the fact that there are critical technologies and materials involved in this. So deglobalization is also an effort to address these big problems. In that context, we have to, one, look inwards, how to enable ourselves to engage more competitive, and it has to be competitively done, otherwise it's unsustainable. Second, we have to be parts of coalitions which are interested in the same objective, which we are doing. And third, we have to offer to these coalition partners what we can through our own capabilities, such as the vaccines we did in the COVID period. So a larger picture, strategic picture, focused on some micro, meso level actions, but at the same time, linking up with key constituencies and strengthening our own hand at home. It's a large ask, but we don't have much time. So we better try and make sure that we start implementing things properly. In Gati Shakti, actually, the government has put in place a structure where all the stakeholders come together and they find out who is the block. and they address it. That is the way we got to go.
Right. Very important point about strategic thinking about India's engagement with markets abroad. Very, very important point to think about. But thank you very much to all our panelists. We're going to open this up to questions. Ladies and gentlemen, whoever wants to ask, please raise your hands and we will put those questions to our audience. Go ahead. All right, if we can move some mics around. So we'll take 2 or 3 questions together. If any of the ladies at the back, any ladies here in the audience, right? Yeah, please give a mic to her.
May I?
We'll take 2 or 3 together.
Good evening, sir. So I'm Dr. Rahul.
I've been told ladies first.
Okay, please.
So a very good evening to everyone. I'm Dr. Anshu Mehta. I have a question to Dr. Rakesh Mohan and Mr. Subhash Chadragarg and Mr. Harshvardhan Singh. So sir, my question is, as sir has mentioned, Dr. Rakesh Mohan, that there is a discrepancy in matching the nutrition part, you can say the health part and the education part, and the biggest problem is because of the income discrepancy, right, sir? So when we talk about India attaining the 3rd position in the economy, so sir, how can we not talk about agriculture, which is actually the source of income for the people at the base of the pyramid? So, sir, what is your take on that? Because that is again a contributor to the manufacturing sector also. Again, sir has talked about services. So again, that is there, and export. So, sir, about 16% of your economy, of your GDP is driven by agriculture, and 60% of the employment is there with the help of agriculture. So, what is your take on it?
Yeah, Mr. Mohan, would you like to take that? This has actually been a point which has triggered a debate right here on this panel.
Actually, that I would say is the most important question. I'm very thank you so much for raising it, and I apologize for not having talked about it earlier. So 2-3 points. One, I will again say R&D. Okay, that has been known. Among my first research papers was indeed on the productivity of R&D and extension in agriculture 50 years ago. Okay, and we did calculate that expenditure on R&D in agriculture has a very, very high return. And in the 70s, after the famine of the late 1960s, the government gave a huge emphasis on R&D, set up agriculture universities in almost every state, and unfortunately that focus has died down. So once again, in agriculture also, the R&D expenditure as a proportion of agricultural GDP has also come down, relative to even 30 years ago. So for looking at how does people's incomes increase in any sector if their productivity increases? How does productivity increase? With better technology. And so among the key issues in agriculture is much higher technology investment, R&D investment, etc. Second point is that we have had too much of a self-image of agriculture being cereals, that is wheat, rice, now we talk about millets, etc. But as incomes increase, if you think of your meal, lunch and your dinner, what proportion of a meal was roti or rice as opposed to vegetables, non-vegetarian, meat, etc., etc. The point is that the expenditure on food as a proportion of total expenditure food on cereals keeps going down as you get better off. Okay, what does increase is fruits, vegetables, fish, meat, everything else. And so the point I'm making is that we need to change our self-image, and I think some things have been announced in this budget actually, that we need to change our self-image and focus more of our policies on all the other non-cereals. So actually the dairy production value added is higher than wheat and rice put together today. and we've done very well in milk. So that's the second point, that we really need to look forward. We need to change our practices and focus more on the non-cereals.
Right.
And connected with that is also large format retails, because then there's a huge connectivity, value chain connectivity on all these things. The final point, and this comes to what you said, that is only if you increase agricultural productivity, health, education, nutrition, they become better off, they are more productive. Then, because of higher productivity, there'll be surplus labor going off for services and manufacturing, and then the whole thing works.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, any more questions? And I will put some questions to Mr. Patil, because Mr. Patil has a commitment, and we'll wrap up this Q&A session soon. But if you can bring the mic here.
Good evening. I live in the US, but I have a home here, so I visit here all the time. To all your questions, I was involved in manufacturing. I started up a manufacturing plant in North Carolina, which I built up for nuclear power plants and sold. Then I got into the engineering side of things. But to answer all of your questions, you need manufacturing. Absolutely you do. Even today in the United States, they will subsidize, they've got billions of dollars to get chip making back to the US. Because for every manufacturing job in the US, it generates 12 more jobs. So it just extrapolates. Now, I ran a plant in India in the 80s. It had about 800 employees. And I realized that the labor rate in India is very cheap. But the labor is not cheap. When you aggregate the total cost of what the labor spends, so you have one guy, usse nahi ho raha, let's hire another guy, usse bhi nahi hua, teesra kar do. I compare it to Pratt & Whitney, which makes the jet engines, a lot of which you fly in. And we built a power plant for them because of energy, because of electricity costs, we optimized it. I was walking through a plant, and this was all empty. There was only about 60 people working. They said 2 years ago, there were 400 people in this plant working 3 shifts a day. Today, there are 60 people working 1 shift a day, producing 3 times the volume of the work because they automated all their machines. Now, you're competing with those people. Here, the labor rate is cheap. They are bringing their labor rates down. So if you're going to compete, it's going to be a dog-eat-dog race until and unless R&D, manufacturing, optimization starts to occur at the very base level. There is no training here. There are no electrical codes. An electrician comes to my house. He charges me $80 an hour. That's 6,400 rupees a day. Here I can get him for 100 rupees. So I know I have an advantage, but he brings 1 pliers. He doesn't know what the voltage is. He doesn't know where the neutral is. Wo laga rehta hai sara din, then he'll fix it.
Okay. Mr. Patil, would you agree?
I think we have a mixed bag when we talk of this. Automation certainly makes things far more, the productivity dramatically goes up. Example was talked about by Mr. Mohan about Larsen Toubro, and not that because I work with the company, we produce warships with Industry 4.0. So scenario is, you will always find in everything, these are not equal. So there will be organizations which know how to make it better. I can make a statement. I have not lost 1 single contract that I bid against a global major. Every program you will make here, if you bid and you have the tools, you have the R&D backing, and you have various other things. Labor is cheap here certainly, but you very rightly said the productivity is low. Divided by that, your cost becomes higher. In India, the other aspect of this is the capital is very expensive. So automation is not easy to do. So you do automation very differently in India than what you would do anywhere else. And that's essentially where you try and strike a balance somewhere in between.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Patil. Any more questions? Please keep them short. Yes, the gentleman at the back, he's been raising his hand for some time. Can we send the mic there?
Hello. Sir, my name is Abhishek Saxena. I have a question with Ambassador Sharma about India's foreign policy. India's relations with China are very tough, and for a long time there has been war, and there are various conflicts. I have a very serious question. Why, if when China is not supporting one India policy and it is creating trouble in Jammu and Kashmir and Arunachal Pradesh, why India is supporting one China policy, and why India does not support Tibet freedom?
I'm afraid, can you just repeat it? There's too much of an echo. If you keep the mic a little...
And keep it a little brief.
Yeah.
My question is, can you hear me?
Yeah.
My question is, when China is not supporting one India policy and is creating problem at Jammu and Kashmir and in Arunachal Pradesh, then why India is supporting one China policy and is not supporting Tibet's freedom? And one more thing, there are instances across the world when there are pacts between countries like USA and Russia in Europe. Pacts and agreements have been disowned. Even China has agreement with India for keeping peace at LAC, and it has gone back in Galwan and elsewhere at Doklam. So why can't India break its pact?
I think Mr. Sarna can take it from here.
I think this is several things in one go. But I think if I get the nub of your question, the answer is this. This is the entire issue of managing a relationship. Do you want to provoke China even further by raising the Taiwan issue? And how do you know what India's real policy on Taiwan is? It may not be always, everything may not be stated. Even the US is very ambiguous on the one China policy and on the issue of Taiwan. So I think this is a question, this is the way we manage things. When China does a very overt, it's a very overt action on, it's a pro-Pak action or a J&K action, then India will respond in the way that it's seen fit. But I don't think you can simplify this simply to saying that if China is supporting Pakistan, we should revise, we should explicitly negate the one China policy. I think there are many ways of responding, and some people would say Quad is one response. And we are responding in different ways in different countries in different scenarios. So it's not such a straightforward thing is all I can say publicly to you.
All right. One more question and then we wrap this panel. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, you both can ask and we'll get the panelists to respond. Okay. Go ahead.
I'll be very brief. I'm Dr. Rahul Singh. I'm the head of incubation for a government medical college. I want to know the role of premier institutions like FMS in building up public incubators in the country.
Okay. What about you?
Yeah, my question is for Mr. Kar. Sir, you said about about the manufacturing, that we miss the manufacturing buzz. So, sir, I completely agree with you. India is all known about the demographic dividend we have. Going forward, it's all about automation and AI-based factories. And US companies have made sure that they're taking out this demographic dividend advantage from the cost.
Brief question, please.
Yes, sir, just 10 seconds more. So they're setting up battery capex at lower cost than China. So what do you suggest for us, for a country like India, where we have a huge population? What do you suggest that what should be the way forward so that we can use this demographic dividend if we are not going on to the manufacturing bus?
Mr. Garg, go ahead.
See, I think this concept of demographic dividend is also a little amorphous. You have too many people, you call it advantage, and you're not able to deploy that labor productively. Most of your labor is unskilled, at least unskilled for the digital economy. So I don't think that should be considered as a huge advantage. Even the play of the world is that more you develop, more you become rich, your proportion of population actually declines, and growth declines, and then it starts tapering off. Even in China now, the population starts declining. So I think we'll have to grow, we'll have to become rich for the population problem to solve, rather than trying to take advantage of that. I am entirely in agreement with you that the future of even manufacturing or future of services is very different than what was in the industrial age. The AIs of the world and the chips everywhere. Anything you take, any equipment today is different than what it was today, tomorrow, yesterday. And therefore, if we focus on the digital economy of the future and the services around, I don't know whether you follow the gaming, which we consider as gambling and wasteful, etc., is largest job creator these days. E-sports are creating enormous amount of jobs. That is where the future of India will lie. If we miss that again, we will probably repent like we missed the industrial revolution.
Okay. Mr. Singh, we had one question about the role that institutions like FMS can play. Could you like to respond?
Thank you. Long back, I did a paper on innovation in developing countries, and so I looked at several experiences. And innovation, so I'm answering this through the concept of innovation itself. In developed economies, normally it's a large technical shift of the frontier itself. While in developing countries, these are smaller steps which take you towards the frontier to adjust for what is missing in your ecosystem. So if you can just focus on what is required in specific sectors, what are the steps to increase productivity or fill a gap together with the user, because the biggest gap in developing countries was that research or educational institutions were not in touch with those who would use the products. So it's not just your responsibility. I think perhaps the other side should also come together and find beneficial initiatives taken in a way where there are mutual advantages. If you can focus on that, you will be solving problems, you will be energizing yourself, and you will be taking steps to address maybe some of the things we've been talking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, to everyone in the audience for joining us. It's been an excellent discussion, and we have really hit all the points when it comes to the factors that will come into effect when India is embarking on the path to becoming the third largest economy, and let's aim higher. I guess that's what everyone in this panel is saying, that becoming the third largest is given. It will happen sooner or later, but let's aim higher and let's try and reach there faster. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you so much. And special thanks for taking your precious time out. We would like to extend our heartfelt thank you to our moderator, Mr. Parikshit Luthra, and distinguished panelists. And for this request, Mr. Kamal Sharma, Mr. Raj Kamal Sharma, President, the FMS Forum, to please come up on dais and give them bouquet. Also, we want to give to our panelists a small token of appreciation. For this, I request Parigi sir to do the honors, please. Can we have a round of applause, please? Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Rajkumar Sharma, President, the FMS Forum. And also now, moving ahead, we want to gift our panelists a small token of appreciation. And for this request, Parigi sir, if you can please join us over here on the dais. Parigi sir. Okay, he wants Sharma sir to do the honors. Please, can we have a round of applause? Thank you. Huge round of applause. And now it's time to announce the winners. Winners of Lucky Draw. These 5 winners are getting a copy of Mr. Sundar Hemrajani's book, Beyond the Mountain, which is on insights into leadership based on a real expedition by FMS students to the hills. And for this, I would request, sir, if you can please join us on this dais, Mr. Sundar Hemrajani. And now I will be announcing winner's name. Request करती हूँ उन सभी winners से please come up on stage. And of course, you will get this wonderful book from sir's hand. And now, the very first winner with us is Hina Verma. Hina Verma. So you are getting autographed book copy from Sundar sir himself. Please can we hear it for Hina Verma. Our second winner is Mansi Sinha. Please make your way to the dais. Mansi Sinha, our second lucky draw winner. Along with it, our third winner is Mohammad Kashif Siddiqui. You too, please join us on the dais. Mohammad Kashif Siddiqui. Jitendra Singh, he's our fourth lucky draw winner. And fifth winner is Anamika Yadav. Okay. Parth Chopra. If one of the winners are there, Parth Chopra. Shweta Batra Arora. And Madhuri. We will hand it over to the call reflex. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Can we hear it for the sir, please? Thank you so much. Now moving ahead. Yes, it's time for you. जिसमें हम यहाँ पर हमारी screen पे हमारे sponsors का एक special ad आपको दिखाना चाहेंगे. Let's now hear from our sponsors.
20 years. Let's take you on a tour of the India we serve and the Indians we secure. We are Indian Airport. Serving India for 20 years. Over the last 14 years, HDFC Ergo has grown at twice the industry growth rate at a 34% compounded annual growth rate to become the 5th largest general insurer in the industry and 3rd largest in the private sector. Today, we have a well-balanced portfolio across lines of business, across distribution channels, and an extensive reach across the length and breadth of the country. We have been profitable since FY13 and have a dividend track record every year since FY14. Since inception, we earned the trust of over 7.
I really don't like low seating. Say your needs.
I request everyone to please stay back just for 5 more minutes. Thank you so much.
Have vitamin D deficiency. So choose Horlicks Women's Plus.
Because our students who are ready with us to share their views, their excitement about this evening, of course, a part of you, can we please invite our students on the dais who can share their excitement, their feeling, the significance of celebrating the Founders' Day. Can we have the students over here on the dais, please?
100% daily calcium and vitamin D and helps improve bone strength in 6 months. I really don't like low seating. Say your knee doesn't like it. Pain isn't caused only by low seating. It can be because of low vitamin D. 9 out of 10 women have vitamin D deficiency. So choose Horlicks Women's Plus. It gives you 100% daily calcium and vitamin D and helps improve bone strength in 6 months. I really don't like low seating. Say your knee doesn't like it. Pain isn't caused only by low seating. It can be because of low vitamin D. 9 out of 10 women have vitamin D deficiency. So choose Horlicks Women's Plus. It gives you 100% daily calcium and vitamin D and helps improve bone strength in 6 months.
So students, you have joined us, please. Can we hear it for our students?
Good evening, everyone. I know it's been a long evening, so I'll just keep it very brief. I was told to speak about the how important FMS is to my journey. So just a little brief about those who don't know me. I have prior experience at PwC, and experience like that exposed me to a lot of different teams and clients across the world. And it's there that I understood that I needed a foundational knowledge of businesses and economies throughout the world. And where else to get that knowledge except from FMS, right? This is the best institution. And with my parents in academia as well, I knew that this is the place to be. So our semester started somewhere in July, and it's been a crazy whirlwind since then. The classes have been invigorating, and all credit to our amazing professors. Me and Sharma, we look forward to the discussions in our classes. And just in the last couple of months, we've seen a major shift happen in the way that we look at the world. So in 2024, when our batch graduates and we move on to our individual careers, we know that FMS will be our foundation and the wind beneath our wings. The family, the FMS family, stays with you throughout your life and provides amazing opportunities like this. So I'm very grateful to the FMS Forum for giving me this platform to voice my thoughts. I'll now pass it on to my batchmate, Shambhavi.
Hello everyone. I'll again keep it very short because we've already exceeded the time. So FMS by all means has given me wings to fly and is rightly called the Red Building of Dreams. I feel really privileged to be standing here on the FMS Founders Day today. Over the 8 months that I've spent at FMS, I have realized why and how FMS is what it is. Every day at FMS comes with a new learning for me and gives me a new perspective on things, and I'll be forever grateful to this institution for providing me with the education and platform to start a great career. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you. And to give a perfect culmination to this very special celebration, I would like to invite Mr. Ashwin Malik, Vice President of the Forum, over here on the dais. Can we hear it for Mr. Ashwin Malik, please? Thank you.
As we come to the end of the Founders' Day, it is my privilege on behalf of FMS Forum to deliver the vote of thanks. The response to the Founders' Day in terms of attendance has been huge and unprecedented, and the event itself has been hugely engaging. I have a long thank you list. To begin with, thanks are due to Dean Vivek Suneja. He is not only the patron of FMS Forum, but also continues to offer us his unstinted and unflinching support. Many thanks to Ms. Nirupama Rao, our chief guest, for a very thoughtful and insightful memorial lecture on the overarching theme, Is This India's Century? Thanks are also due to the distinguished set of panelists drawn from diverse domains, including external affairs, economics, the bureaucracy, and the corporate world, for a most enriching panel discussion that benefited from your vast experience and erudition. Thank you, Mr. Parikshat Luthra, for moderating the panel discussion with your customary thoroughness, eloquence, and panache. Many thanks to our multiple sponsors. This event would not have been possible without their assistance. Thanks are also due to colleagues at FMS Forum that helped put this event together. While such events are collective efforts, I must take the liberty to recognize especially Puneet Wadhwa, Secretary FMS Forum, and Alok Barara, member of the Executive Committee, for their untiring efforts that they performed with customary modesty. Thank you, MSA, and the group of volunteers drawn from the full-time and executive MBA batch for helping organize such a big event. Thanks are also due to efforts of our partner vendors, including our marketing partner, Casima Digital Media. With these words, I conclude the vote of thanks, and everybody is please invited to have dinner at the atrium. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malik. Once again, thanking our sponsors, title sponsor STL, main sponsor HUL, Co-sponsors Star Health, Mirchi and HDFC Ergo. Our associate sponsors, Nestle and Indian Infra. Our other sponsors, Artemis Times Out of Home, the Media Supplement, Ad Growth Media, India Outdoor Advertising, Global Advertisers. Now, may I request all of our guests to join us for the dinner. Thank you so much and have a very good evening.